All right. Let's do it.
Great. Okay, thank you guys so much for joining us here today. We have 53 people and counting. People are still trickling in, but we'll just kick it off. Welcome to the second ever episode of our new pop-up talk show. We've already undergone a rebranding to from Passion Economics to Means of Creation. We had a little bit of a trademark issue with the last name, but I like this new one because it sort of harkens back to means of production, except it's about platforms that democratize the ability to create, but also means as in meaningful, like, get it? Anyways, in this show, we are going to be interviewing founders and operators who are building companies that help people to do what they love for a living. I'm your host, Lee Jin, along with Nathan Baschez, and we started this show because we really want to encourage innovation in the passion economy and help aid the world in becoming a place where people can unite their passions with their professions. And hopefully by shining a light on the innovators and thinkers in this space, we can help and inspire more founders and creators who are forging their own paths. So our guest today is Greg Isenberg, who is a serial entrepreneur in the consumer tech world. He was most recently the CEO and founder of Islands, which was a messaging app for college students that was acquired by WeWork in 2019. And he's been starting companies ever since he was 13 years old, and previously started a company called 5by, a video discovery service that was acquired by StumbleUpon. Earlier this year, he left WeWork to start Late Checkout, which is a product studio that designs, creates, and acquires internet communities. A quick plug that this show is brought to you by the Everything newsletter bundle, which you can find at everything.substack.com. If you want to read some of my personal thoughts, I'm at lee.substack.com, and I think Greg is recently started publishing at latecheckout.substack.com. And a quick note before we dive in on structure. So for the first 30 minutes, Nate and I will have a discussion with Greg, and then for the rest of the time, we'll switch over to audience questions. So if you guys think of anything that comes to mind as we're talking, just pop it into the Q&A, and for the last half of the show, we'll go through those and ask Greg your questions. So without further ado, let's jump in. Thank you so much, Greg, for being here today and coming on to our new talk show.
This is going to be fun, guys. I'm excited.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the first question that I wanted to kick things off with is, you've been building in the consumer space for so long, from 5by to StumbleUpon to Islands. I'd love to get your sense of how has the consumer social landscape evolved since you started working in this space, I think maybe a decade ago? What have been some of the biggest changes that you've witnessed, and where do you see the biggest opportunities still today?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think the earlier decade in consumer social was really just about giving people microphones at the core. So, allow people to talk. So Facebook, Twitter, all these broadcasting technologies that basically allowed people to speak and express themselves. And I think what's happened over the last few years is, if you give everyone a microphone, it gets pretty loud, and it's gotten really, really loud. People are trying to speak over each other. It's really hard to hear. And I think that's why, there's been this shift, I'd say over the last 4 years, from very much a me broadcasting to an us. So what you're seeing is, the rise of your Discord groups, the rise of your Fortnite worlds, your rise of your group chats, anything that's more group and community oriented. I think that's what you're seeing. And I think it's a bit of an exodus, and it's a bit of like refuge. Like, that's why it just so happens, like, it's just the most fun, these places are the most fun part of the internet. And that's what the internet was designed initially to be. It was designed to be a fun place. And we sort of lost our way a bit. So I think that that's been the biggest shift.
Yeah, I want to dig into that idea of the shift from me to us, from like me to we a little bit more. You've been talking a lot about communities recently, and specifically you wrote this really interesting blog post called The Guide to Unbundling Reddit, which outlines the opportunities to unbundle really massive social platforms like Reddit and Facebook. And specifically, there was a line in there that I want to probe into, which is, you wrote, quote, "The destiny of every massive social network or marketplace is unbundling. It's not a matter of if, but when." So talk to us a little bit about this. Why do you think that is the destiny to be unbundled? Like Craigslist, 25 years in, despite lacking any sort of product innovation, is still going quite strong. And it looks like Facebook is as well, and Reddit is as well. So talk about your thoughts on why is the force towards unbundling?
Yeah, well, I think, before we talk about the force from unbundling, I think it's important to talk about the force for bundling and why that's happened. When you
let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about it. When you raise venture capital, you're, either implicitly or explicitly, your duty is to grow. You have to grow as quick as possible. That's why, you can see a lot of these. Facebook started as a vertical network, literally for social, for college kids, a social network for college kids, and it's gone and sort of expanded from there. So I think, there's the big reason why it's, people have been bundling is because of the pressure to grow. And I think what's happened is we got to this point where Instagram's adding all these features. It's become very bloated. Facebook has added a lot of features. It's become very bloated. And this has happened in not just social networks, but also marketplaces. My belief is that a marketplace is just a social network dressed up differently. It's very much a similar kind of concept. And recently we got to this point where it was like peak bundle. And I think, I was really convinced in this sort of unbundling concept of, in places like Reddit, in places like LinkedIn, in 2017, 2018, 2019. But when 2020 hit and COVID hit and people literally couldn't be in physical places anymore, like the idea of community became even more important than ever. If you go to church every day, or you play mahjong every day with your group of friends, and you have all these places where you have community, and you can no longer literally be in those places, or it just doesn't feel safe anymore. It's just an opportunity to actually create these verticals. So, that's the reason why it's been bundling. That's the reason why it's unbundling. And the reason why I like to focus on Reddit for 2020 and 2021, at least, is because I fundamentally believe that out of all the platforms that are that could be unbundled, and there's a bunch, and I can name a few. I think it's LinkedIn. I think it's Zoom. I think it's McKinsey even. I think it's Vanguard. I think it's, platforms like that. Reddit is just one of the main leaders in kind of like where communities live. And it's a really easy way to basically find out the pulse of a community. So, the reason I wrote that post was to inspire founders and to inspire makers to use Reddit and use platforms like that as a listening source, and to see what's trending, to listen, and to come up with interesting ideas.
Totally. It seems like so far, a lot of the unbundling has happened more centered around features than like topics or vertical communities. So like Facebook led to like Instagram, which is sort of like unbundling the photo feature from Facebook, or like Messenger, where they unbundled themselves. And then, obviously like WhatsApp, which kind of was an external competitor that they acquired, unbundling like chat functionality. I would say that like a lot of the Craigslist unbundling was like around sort of like, maybe like dating became its own thing. Anyway, it's like less around like what type of community and more around what type of functionality. Do you think that that'll change now? And like with Reddit, it'll be more around the type of community, and like what caused the pattern to be what it was then with Facebook, and what might shift it to be sort of more community oriented now with Reddit?
Well, the one thing I don't want people to do is to like hear me say Reddit is being unbundled and then basically look for like, go use things like, Mighty Networks and platforms and just like basically basically take a Facebook group and just like target it at a group. Because I think that you can try that, but 99.999% of times it's not going to work. Like what I'm talking about is, I'm talking about how do you create that bespoke coffee shop feeling, not the Starbucks feeling. And the Starbucks feeling is what you're going to get from basically products that are just reusable, and unless it's, you can customize it in such a way that like it feels bespoke. But I think that really in order to really serve a community, and by the way, I think the word serve is a really interesting one versus create a community, because the communities already exist whether you like it or not. But
Yeah.
you're just you're there to serve. That's what you're there to do. You're there to bring people together and serve. So once you've built that community together and you're able to serve them, I think the question is, it's less, I always say like start with the community and then build the software. Don't start with the software and then build the community. I think that's like a common mistake a lot of folks make. And I think, if you're listening to this, one of the things I would think about is how can you be 100% sure that an insert subreddit here or insert Facebook group here, insert vertical here, that this is a product feature. Now it might be a feature, or it might be a network. It might be a marketplace, it might be a social network. It might be, who knows? But whatever that is that it's a burning need for that community.
I think that distinction between starting with the community versus starting with the software is really, really important. So
Yeah.
I recently tweeted this market map that showed, I think, like 130 plus different new community platform tools, that most of which were started in the last couple of years, which have a value proposition similar to what you were describing, which is like, I have this Reddit subgroup or Facebook group, and I just want to put it in a separate place and migrate all my users over there. Or like I have a community that I run offline and I just want to put them all in a digital product. So they started with a software platform and then like try to get their communities to come over. So in your opinion, is that, I guess what you're saying is that that is probably going to be less successful of a strategy than starting with the community, really deeply understanding their needs and building a software product that aligns very deeply with them?
100%. I mean, I think the people that go and create these cookie cutter communities they're just gonna lose. It's not gonna work.
Yeah.
I think the other distinction I would make is before you even start with a community, you're actually starting with an audience. And then the question is, how do you convert an audience to a community? And that's a really important distinction when you're designing, when you're trying to build a product, because and you know, because community has become so hot over the last, you know, the topic, like over the last year, let's say, what I've noticed is that people just replace the word audience with community, and it actually is, you know, like I love that people are talking about community more, but it kind of pisses me off a little bit because they're two different things. Like an audience is just like, you can have an audience, you know, you can think about it as like a storefront. You just have like people walking by, but that's not a real community. That's not like a community is like, you know, a shared language that you have with someone. You know,
I think a lot of like executives use community as a euphemism for like target market. It just sounds like nicer.
Or I think what
or
they
like
actually mean is
like
Instagram followers. Like the number of D2C companies that came to pitch that were like, we have this huge engaged community, when they actually meant Instagram followers, is like tremendous. I think that distinction between audience and community is so key. And I tried to break this down once in a post of mine where I said, I think the hallmarks of a real community are like intentionality, like people are seeking you out as a destination, not just consuming content from the community in a feed full of other things. I think there needs to be like peer-to-peer interaction going on, not just brand or single creator to all of their followers. Like there needs to be real engagement happening between members of a community. And then I think another aspect of it that I highlighted was UGC. Like, are the users and members of the community empowered to actually create content that other people would see? And I think that Instagram, the way that the product is designed, it's not really facilitating community, because there's this hierarchy between the brand or the individual's content versus all of their followers' content. So I agree, like people overuse the term community when they just mean customers or followers.
Yeah, and Instagram isn't designed to foster community. That's why, like, I remember, I think it's like, what, 3 years ago now, where Facebook changed their mission statement to make them, you know, to make the world a more open and connected place to enable community or something like that.
Meaningful communities.
Meaningful communities. I mean, we can break that down, but like, you know, I feel like I'm an expert in community and I still don't know what that means. I don't know how, you know, for me, a mission statement is really important because it's the guiding principle and guiding light as to how to develop your company at every single level. And I could say, I mean, I'd love, you know, to hear from people from Facebook, but I can honestly say that, like, when I look at the features that they're shipping, that it doesn't feel like it's with the guiding light of enabling meaningful communities at all.
Can you go deeper? Like, what have they shipped that feels like kind of contra the mission?
Well, I mean, you know, the one feature that I saw Facebook Inc. launch today was a feature called staying at home. Did you guys see this?
No.
Okay, so basically, my friend Danny Trin actually tweeted about it. I'll pull it up here on his Twitter. But basically, he works at a company called Zenly. And I don't know if you can see my screen, but on the Zenly's a location app that can track your friends, and over here it says you've been at home for a certain amount of time, so you can see how long your friends have been at home. And then what Instagram launched today is this little thing where it says staying at home.
Is the idea just to like use sort of group like peer pressure to be like, don't invite me to stuff, like you should stay at home too because like coronavirus and all that stuff?
I think maybe, but I don't know if it enables meaningful communities. You know, I think, you know, that's, when I look at some of the companies I really look up to, like, for example, Nike. I think Nike, their mission statement is something to enable movement or something like that. And it's like, could you look at Nike and look at all the products and be like, are they enabling movement by like creating this running shoe? Like, probably. I don't see that same consistency with Facebook.
Greg, I have a question about community, which is, what do you think is the appropriate monetization model for a community? Like, this has been a complaint that I've heard from so many large Facebook group admins or Reddit admins who do it as like really a labor of love to oversee their group that they've made over the years. And I've heard that they spend maybe 40 hours a week moderating posts, trying to connect people to each other, and there's just no good monetization path for how to make that sustainable. What are examples that you've seen of successful monetization strategies for communities?
So firstly, I don't think community owners have enough options to monetize their communities. Like, I just don't think that we've done enough iterations as founders and entrepreneurs to come up with, interesting concepts around enabling the community organizer. That's number one. Number two, I think that community organizers fundamentally should have that ability. Even if the thing with community organizers is that 80% of them are probably doing it 100% out of labor of love. Like, they don't want to monetize. But the thing is, communities are businesses in a lot of ways, and it needs to be sustainable. Like, how do you create a sustainable community? And I think that's the problem with a lot of communities. So, some of the more, I guess, popular examples of like, how do you monetize communities? I mean, we all have Substacks. We all put paywalls in front of our content, or actually I don't. And, but, I might in the future. And I think that's a really obviously interesting way. But that's literally one way.
You can have live Zooms. I hear some people do that.
Yeah, exactly. You can do live Zooms.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool way. I think what I like about live Zooms over just like straight up like newsletter content is, it's like, think about this. We're going to have, 30 minutes of like just chatting, and then 30 minutes of like bringing in our community and talking with them, like, which is really, really cool, and like going back to the Instagram example, like, you can't really do that on Instagram's platform. But, how do you enable us to not only monetize our community, but engage other communities? So I'd love to see more things in live video. I'd love to see more things in commerce. How do we enable people, community organizers to, create their merch lines? One of the things that worked really well at Islands, which was a social network for college students, is we created, like, we basically worked with the creative director who did like Bieber's clothes and The Weeknd's clothes and Skrillex's clothes, and we created this really really cool merch line that really spoke to our audience and spoke to our communities, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it. We put up sweaters for sale to college students for $120 US, and they were buying it. We were like, oh, we couldn't believe it. It was crazy. But that's what a membership of a community is. So how do you like, for Lee, let's say, like, Lee, like, maybe someone does want to buy merch from you. Maybe someone wants a coffee. I mean, I'd buy a coffee mug with a quote by you, Lynn, if it said something that around communities around it, or the passion economy. And I'm sure there's others who would too.
Yeah, put a comment in the chat if you want to buy my line of merchandise.
We need mugs with, like, that'd be perfect. Talk show accessories.
Right? And it's like, okay, you guys, we're just jamming here. One of my favorite things to do is just jamming ideas. But I think, like, you guys both have virtual backgrounds now. Like, why can't Greg Isenberg sponsor your backgrounds?
Fair.
That's super interesting. Yeah. No, I'm starring on this television show next month called Zoom Bachelor as a contestant. And I was trying to find a brand sponsor for my Zoom background, actually. So if anyone wants to sponsor my Zoom background and be made available to viewers nationwide, worldwide, really, for 3
Yeah,
hours, hit me up. I
amazing.
think this is super interesting. I think one of the methods of monetizing community that I feel like has worked less well is just charging straight up for membership into the community itself, like putting up a paywall gate to even accessing the community in the first place. And I think the reason why that works less well is because people want to know what they're paying for and what they're getting into and get value from the community before committing to paying for something. And I like the options that you suggested more of merch, content, events, because they feel like even deeper ways to engage with the community, and access to more exclusive content beyond just access to the community itself.
Here's a good lens for thinking about, is this a good idea for monetization for, you know, community organizers? If you monetize your community and the answer is that if I actually buy this coffee mug, if I actually you know, participate in this Zoom chat, I become more of a member in this community, then that's a really good idea. And that is like a net positive on your community. You know, so I think that's a really important distinction as well, is, you know, if you are going to monetize your community, think about ways that it makes it stronger, not weaker, and that it's not a leech sort of vibe, it's sort of a giving vibe. Because I've also seen people just completely hurt their communities from diluting it with, it just, you know, it feels like Times Square, and you don't want that too.
Mm-hmm. Right, like how to align monetization with almost an indicator that the user is even more invested, and it becomes like a badge of membership into this broader community, like a self-identification thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like, we've only scratched the surface there. There's so many opportunities where you can think of, you know, I saw someone running with a like shirt that said, I even wrote it down, it's called, I think it was called like Running Members Cult or something, which I thought was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of shirt you got to Google when you see somebody wearing that.
I was like, wait, what is it? He was running. Here, let me pull it up. I wrote it down. Running club member, that's what it was. And I thought that was so interesting that, you know, here you have someone who bought, he's obviously a runner, he was running, and he seemed like super fit and like one of those people that just like was really into running. He had all the running gear. So much so that he was wearing a tank top that said running club member. And that's like dedication. That's like your super fan. That's your power fan. And like, that's an example of like, he's a part of a community. He wants to show off that he's a part of his community, and people want to pay for that. And it's not just like, that's not like you have to convince them to like pull out their credit card. That's like, they're waking up early in the morning and they're stoked to do it. And that's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that I think the best consumer brands are the ones that make people feel like they're a member of a community, that they would be actually proud to show off their usage of that brand, and it makes them feel like part of an in-group and a sense of belonging, more so than just purchasing something.
It's so,
oh,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Nate.
Were you going to change the topic?
I was.
Okay, I just want to say, like, it's so funny because like, you see someone else wearing like, you know, the gear of like some other club, and you're like, that's kind of funny, you know. And then there's like this other thing that you're a huge fan of, and you're like, of course, like this is my thing, like I love it. I want everyone to know that like I love this thing. And I think there's a very interesting like how it looks from the outside versus how it feels from the inside dynamic to a lot of communities. That like, you know, I'm the type that like I love this like blog Slate Star Codex. I'm just like a huge fan of his writing, and like yeah, I would absolutely wear a t-shirt or buy a mug, and I don't think he sells any of those things, but like and people would think I'm kind of weird for doing that, but then like, you know, whatever, that's just the way it works. It's kind of funny how those things happen.
I mean, I agree. And I think there's physical goods that you would buy, and there's probably virtual stuff that virtual experiences that you pay for too.
Totally. I had the nice virtual experience of getting to tweet in solidarity with Slate Star Codex when the New York Times was going to publish that story. So that was a fun.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Anyway, sorry. We can continue.
So Greg, I want to do like a quick retrospective on Islands. So for everyone in the audience, Islands was like Slack for colleges. I remember your pitch very vividly when you said that. And it was a messaging app for college students where they could create groups based on interests, clubs, class year, etc. And you started this company, I think in 2016 or 2017, really in the depths of the consumer winter when no one wanted to start a consumer social company because, like, I think the prevailing opinion at the time was consumer social was over. So I'd love to just get your sort of thoughts on top lessons learned and what you would do differently today if you were to restart a social app for this demographic.
Yeah, I mean, so Islands is an interesting example because I actually feel as if we did a lot of things right. You know, we understood our community really well. I mean, I literally went to go live basically on college campuses and show our app to like users and get feedback, and we built a team that was going from school to school, and we weren't like in our like high tower in Silicon Valley just like building an app for college students. Like we were there, which was really fun and really cool. And you know, it took us a while to iterate to get to the point where it started to work, but it worked. We focused, someone asked which colleges did we hit. We started in the South, the Alabamas, the Mississippis. You know, one of the things we did learn early on was the prevailing wisdom was if you want to scale a app at college, go to the cool kids, go to the fraternities, go to the sororities. That's why we started in the South, because Greek life was a huge percentage of school life. You know, so many people were a part of it. And we built this app, which was a community app basically for college students, and it helped them figure out like what to do and where to go, and you know, interest-based discussions. And what we found out was like fraternities and sororities didn't really connect with it. And we started asking ourselves like why is it that, you know, for Tinder, for Bumble, for House Party, all these apps, they would be able to scale through Greek life and we couldn't. And we found out that what Islands was basically a fraternity or sorority, but for everyone else. So it was like a built-in, like what is a you know, a sorority or a fraternity? Ultimately, it's a built-in community. It's a physical community. You get to know where the party is. You get to meet friends. You get to be a membership of I'm Sigma Chi, so this is the type of person I am. And it turned out that the most disconnected people, like the LGBTQ community in the South or Muslims in the South, who felt disconnected and who needed a place to talk and was looking for community, they needed it the most. So if I would redo anything, I think it would be don't accept prevailing wisdom on community, because there is no real prevailing wisdom on community. It's a case-by-case basis. Like what we were talking about in the beginning, you know, I think when you craft, you know, a community strategy, it's bespoke. You have to understand that particular community extremely well. So that's one thing I would do differently. The other thing is, like, you know, if you're going to start a venture-backed company, make sure it's in a market that people want to back, unless you're making serious revenue. So we knew when we started the company that it was the winter of consumer social, and we were like, we don't care. We're going to create a great product. And it turns out that you can't do that because you're dependent on VCs for money. You know, we had partner meetings with like pretty much almost every top fund in Silicon Valley. No one was willing to give us the check size we needed. And that's because It's because like I said, we started in the winter and we ended in the nuclear winter. So.
Was the response basically from venture capitalists like, consumer social is so dominated now by these large social platforms that have such powerful network effects, it's going to be impossible for you to reach any sort of meaningful scale?
I think the response was the prevailing wisdom was that, Facebook was going to copy anything. So it's like, why even do it? Yeah.
Yeah. I think people had the very recent memory of stories being copied by Instagram, and the fact that Snap had gotten to such huge user scale, but seemed to be struggling in terms of actually converting that to real revenue. That was very top of mind for everyone.
Yeah,
that was.
And same with Twitter and same with Reddit. It's kind of like, even if you're one of the top successes of all time, it's not always an amazing business. Those are great businesses. Obviously, they're, Twitter's a public company. They're doing it'd be a great success if you invest in the Series A or the seed round of that company, but it's like, the narrative ends up sort of dampening the enthusiasm a lot for these kinds of ideas. And so you need such sort of breathtaking traction to overcome that, it's just really hard to do.
Well, I would say you not only need the user side traction, but I think you need a new business model now that is not wholly dependent on advertising.
Well, and the other thing for founders to know is, I remember as soon as I raised my seed round, I went to a VC, who I won't name, but a top tier VC. And I was like, what are the metrics I need to hit so that you'll give me a term sheet for my Series A? And I wrote down the metrics and I showed him on a paper and I said, is it this? These are it? He said, yep. And then we iterated. I had some natty lights on college campuses, and we worked really hard, and we made it really a really great product that people really loved, and we exceeded those metrics. And I went back to him. I flew back. I'm like, okay, so now we're going to raise our Series A. This is awesome. And I show him the paper, and I was like, hey, we're here. Let's do this thing. And he was like, oh, did I say that? No. So
how can I be helpful?
How can I be helpful? How can I be helpful?
Oh man, yeah, that's funny. I mean, if I were a VC, I would never write down on a piece of paper. Though you wanna retain your option value, right? Of the narratives or whatever. But that's it's just such a great example of how important narratives are to where capital flows, right?
Absolutely.
And how they can shift over time, and how hard it is to predict how you'll feel in the future. Even if they hit that, then I'll feel great. And it's like, oh, I still don't. Why? Yeah. Well, emotions govern everything.
The good news is that capital will flow to, passion economy and people building products that enable community in the next few years. And I don't see it. I actually think it's going to be many years. It's going to be the renaissance for these types of products. And I love Substack. I think it's awesome. I'm a huge believer. At the same time, I think that's just one example of one product. There's so many different categories. Maybe Substack gets into them, but I think probably there's just going to be a lot of really interesting products, and it feels good to be on the right side of the table, I guess, this time.
Yeah. It's exciting to be a consumer person again, a consumer founder, a consumer investor.
That's right.
And I agree with you that I think any platform that is helping create a new path to economic empowerment, that is helping people to create things more easily and offer them to an audience that really values it, is something that is going to experience a lot of tailwinds in the upcoming decade. And Substack is, one very specific example of that, but probably not everyone in the world wants to monetize through writing a newsletter. There's many other types of skills and talent and knowledge that can be monetized, including the know-how of building and attracting a community. And I think that's one of the skills that will find new business models in the upcoming years. So I'm really excited to see that.
Yeah, cheers to tailwinds. May the narratives ever be in our favor.
Absolutely.
So with that, let's switch over to audience questions. If you have questions, please type them in the Q&A. There's a really interesting one that I want to start off with, which is asked by an anonymous attendee. So thank you, Anonymous. And this person asks, what drives your interest in communities long term? What do strong communities unlock for society that makes them a need to have that you're driving towards?
So my belief, so this isn't something that like I just decided to pick up because I read a Substack post and I'm like, I'm all in on community, you know, like this is something I've been doing my entire life. This is core to who I am as an individual. I believe that when like-minded people come together, it unlocks crazy potential. I think that community is a fundamental, it's in our DNA. When we feel in our communities and it's a positive experience, there's nothing like it. And you know, maybe it's a different type of feeling than dopamine. It's like the dopamine for community. I don't know what the name of that chemical is. That you just feel, you know, you feel loved. You feel really loved. And I think, you know, many people are lonely, and it's a terrible thing. And um, I think it stresses people out. I think it potentially kills people actually. And I think it's an amazing space to be in, to be able to create digital products to bring people together virtually, and enable people who want to do this for a living, or not even as a living, to monetize. I think it's amazing. So I hope to continue working on this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I often tell people that part of the reason why I love being a consumer investor is that we are solving for fundamental human needs. Like the products and the specific solutions that people are building change over time, but fundamentally, there's not that many consumer needs that everyone in the world is experiencing. Like there's the desire to feel connectivity to other people, to feel part of a group, to feel affirmed and a sense of belonging and love. There's the desire to make money to fulfill one's physiological needs, the ability to be entertained and to pass time in an enjoyable way. And I think all great consumer products solve one of those core fundamental needs really, really well, better than anything that has come before. But I think community for sure is one of those fundamental human desires.
Totally. Should we do the next question?
Yes.
So there's a couple that I think are very related, so I'm just going to group them. Sari asks, what are some examples of communities with an indie coffee shop vibe? Soren asks, what are some examples of unique interactions or communication methods that fit perfectly for a given community? I think maybe those two have some overlap in the answer. And then Sam asks, he basically is asking for social experiences that are like addicting and unique. So it's kind of like, how do you actually like create sort of like structural elements inside communities that create value for people? And then with a potential specific version of like, how does that work with like the sort of indie coffee house vibe?
Cool. Yeah. So I'll give a few examples. I'm just going through my phone here to see what I've been playing with recently. All right, let's open it up. Okay, so this is an old one, but I think is still super relevant for a particular niche. Hodinkee. Do you guys know Hodinkee?
Yeah.
Watches, right?
Community watches, high-end watches. Great example. So Hodinkee, like there was no real community or place where people who liked vintage watches could come together. I know that sounds like super bougie, but like those people need places too.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. So Hodinkee basically creates great content around vintage watches. It creates a shop that a marketplace basically, where people can buy and sell. There's some community features around it, and it has like little things like in the app. There's a clock, and if you, again, like going back to like what we were talking about, like feeling like you're a part of the community. I think Hodinkee does that super well, and it's pretty awesome that they're also able to monetize like crazy, because some of these watches are thousands of dollars, and they're able to enable their community to buy and sell really easily, similar to like a Goat or an app like that. So I like Hodinkee, and they also opened up stores, pop-up stores, like in New York and stuff like that. I think that's really cool. Hodinkee, I'll just do a couple more quickly. Stadium Live is a good one. Stadium Live is basically kind of a, how do I explain it? It's kind of like ESPN for Gen Z. And you basically get assigned an avatar, and you get thrown into this group chat around a sports game. And when it comes to memberships and communities, like being a Raiders fan or 49ers fans, like we have allegiances to these sports communities. So I think a way that they just have a really fresh spin on around community and around their particular audience that I really like.
Awesome. There's a question about something that you mentioned earlier in this conversation, which I actually had a question about too. It relates to unbundling. And can you elaborate more on what you were saying about the opportunity to unbundle McKinsey and Vanguard?
Sure. I was just thinking about that the last 24 hours. It's like a new sort of thought. McKinsey is a massive business. I don't have the market cap in front of me, but I mean, what do we think? How big do we think McKinsey is?
At least $1 billion.
It's at least $1 billion, right?
that was a low estimate. I think, I don't know, like maybe 100.
It's a lot. Listen, if you're the founder of McKinsey, you can spend a lot of time on a Hodinkee and buy some watches. Let's put it that way. So McKinsey, the process, I don't know if anyone here has worked with McKinsey, but if you have, the process, and how it's, you have a consulting project, you pay them, anywhere from $300 to $3,000 per hour for these consultants to come up with solutions to some sort of business problem that you have. What ends up happening, unless you're Coca-Cola or some of these big massive Fortune 50 companies, you end up just getting like an MBA intern a lot of the time, or MBA, new grad who obviously gets paired with someone senior. But I think it's all that to say is I don't think you get that you're the best possible work. I think there's opportunity.
Pete, right, from like when he first started his career. Very smart. It was his first job though, right?
There you go. I mean, they attract wonderful and smart people. I just think that there's an opportunity to modernize. I've been saying this new thing now. There's an opportunity to modernize and monetize very well. I think there's an opportunity to basically think about what are all the verticals that McKinsey hits and how you can modernize and digitize it, and monetize it, give some savings back to regular businesses. So that's what I thought about McKinsey and Vanguard. I mean, Vanguard's already getting unbundled with things like Robinhood. Buying, Vanguard makes its money by a percent of like a management fee in creating these ETFs, but with the democratization of essentially finance now, it's free to trade, where in the past it has not been free to trade, and it's accessible to trade. You have products like Robinhood or public.com that are really good at just allowing people to access a lot of these funds and a lot of these individual stocks for free and educating them at the same time, that I don't know how valuable Vanguard, is. So I think you're going to see a lot of innovation from companies like that.
Love it. Next question, Oscar. I love this question. Basically, it's about lock-in. It says, with the passion economy, you're empowering users to build their own community. How would you prevent them to go away with that community? For example, a store in Shopify could build their own e-commerce platform, and then Shopify would lose them, and as a result, their clients.
What do you think, Nathan?
I think that it's you have to have the right pricing structure. So like if you're taking a big like 10% transaction fee on revenue from that community, and like as it gets big, it becomes more and more likely that 10% of the revenue is like more than enough to pay someone to like build a custom solution. And then maybe that custom solution would even be like better for the community's needs than kind of the generic platform's needs. So there's this sort of like growing incentive over time to switch. So if you're really going to be a platform, I think you need to provide a lot of flexibility, and you need to have the right pricing structure so that people are more incentivized to just stay on the platform and extend it because you've given them the ability to, and you're not like charging a huge amount. At least that's like sort of my experience so far on the creator side of Substack. But there's also this other thing, which is like, maybe you can build such a good network where users are like on it trying to discover new communities or something like that, but it's really not an option. Like you can't not be on YouTube if you're creating videos on the internet and you want like people to see them. It's very hard to build a community outside YouTube. It's very hard to create sort of like following outside Twitter in a lot of ways. Twitter is the top of funnel for a lot of this stuff, or like Reddit is the top of the funnel for a lot of this stuff. So it's tricky, but at the same time, I mean, the thing you're sort of noticing and thinking will happen a lot more is like maybe people will build specialized stuff to get off Reddit, right? For some of these communities. But it's really hard to move a community once it exists. Like if people are used to visiting a certain place and that's their routine, like if it's in an app or in a website or something, very hard to unstick that and like say, oh no, everybody go to the new URL now. Or download this new app now. That's very, very hard. With something like email where people are just used to sort of like seeing you in their inbox, maybe that's a little easier if you can export your email list.
Yeah,
I'm curious what y'all think.
I saw like there were a few companies in the past few years that tried to break off of large horizontal social platforms and spin out their own products and get all of their community members to move somewhere else as a destination website or app. I don't think any of them have really been successful because to Nate's point, once a community already exists somewhere and there's really strong network effects and they're engaging with each other on a regular basis, it becomes really hard unless you just shut the old thing down to say, okay, everyone, like, let's move over here. And by the way, potentially pay for it.
Yeah, I think, the way I think about it is like, if you're creating a new car company, everyone is gonna, like, if you're creating Tesla, let's just say, like, this is 2004, everyone's going to compare you to other car companies. They're going to be like, does it have 4 wheels? Is it gas? Is it electric? Is there a windshield? Where's the trunk? All these things. Oftentimes, when you create something in the same category as something else, people do these comparisons. And then the switching, it's hard for people to switch to new things, basically. That's what I'm getting at. So the key is how can you create a community that they can't get anywhere else, so that it's a completely new thing, and you could own that mind share and then become the incumbent, basically. So that's why I think like Tesla was smart, because like Tesla got, like, I know this isn't exactly what you were talking about, but Tesla got that first mover advantage with electric cars. When people think electric cars, they think Tesla, even though Toyota is probably a bigger, or maybe not now with the stock market, but Toyota has like got a lot of electric cars on the road. So my advice, yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just say my advice is like, build a Tesla. Don't, my advice is don't build a Tesla, actually. Like, you want to build, like, the communities that I look at building when I'm unbundling Reddit is like stuff that doesn't really have a home.
Right. Yeah, when I first saw the title of your blog post, Guide to Unbundling Reddit, I was like, I disagree with this vehemently. because I actually think there's so much on Reddit that could never exist independently. Like there's so many small niche communities that people like to sample content from on like a very ad hoc basis, very casually, that would just never rise to the level of being a standalone independent property. So I think like the benefit of horizontal social platforms and the benefit of bundling is like there's a lot of casual fans out there for things that just don't have the intensity of affinity to something such that they could make it support itself as a standalone property.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the vast majority of communities, Reddit is fine for the community use case. But I think for that doesn't mean that there's a ton of opportunity to create bespoke experiences. It's just you have to go and figure out where are these opportunities, and then how do you that's why I'm fine. Like I was speaking to someone today and they're like, why are you telling everyone how to do the thing basically that you're doing? Well, don't you want information asymmetry? Isn't that like what you want? And I'm like, I don't, I'm happy to give the process of how we do it and like basically open source that. But I think that the key will be finding the right communities and what is the right product, which is no easy task.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone here and on the internet really appreciates your sharing and open sourcing all of your insights around community building and consumer social. We are at time and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you for sharing part of your Friday morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are with us. And stay tuned for our next episode next Friday, guest to be announced. And I think Greg and both of us are reachable probably on Twitter. You can find us across the internet. And thanks so much for coming on and joining us, Greg.
This was fun, guys. It's an honor to be among you legends.
Likewise. Awesome.
Okay, thanks so much,
everybody.
everyone. Bye.
Thank
Have a nice
you.
weekend.
Bye.
Have a nice weekend.